Here I have 25 quotations that I think are important for you to know when thinking about the character Eric Birling, who of course appears in J.B. Priestley's play An Inspector Calls. Now somehow I've whittled that list of 25 down to 10 quotations that I think are really important for you to know when thinking or writing about this character. But which 10 are they? Let's find out. So if you're watching this video, it is probably because you're after some quotations that are about the character Eric Birling in J.B. Priestley's play An Inspector Calls. If so, well done you. You have come to the right place. My name, it's Liam, aka Mr. Knight, aka DystopiaJunkie. And as well as providing you with 10 quotations about Eric, I'll also give you a quick summary of his character and a shortish discussion of what I think Priestley's intentions were when writing this character. You definitely want to stick around for that, as having some ideas about an author's possible intentions will help you to secure the higher grades. Make sure you have a pen and paper out in front of you, as I will be saying a lot of things that will not necessarily be appearing on screen during this video. And of course, if you think that this video is super helpful and that you would like to see more content just like this, you can let me know by dropping the video a like, commenting on it, and of course subscribing to my channel. Here is my quick summary of Eric. So as far as we know, his name is Mr. Eric Birling. Arthur and Sybil Birling are his parents and Sheila is his sister. But what can we notice from that? Well, we can notice that he is the only son that Mr. and Mrs. Birling have. As such, it would be expected that he would one day become his father's business partner and one day take full control of it. That's a lot of pressure. At the same time, Mr. Birling seems to favour Gerald. Has Eric been rejected by his own father? Now we know that Eric is part of the younger generation. There are a few occasions where we see that he is not as strongly capitalist as his parents are, and a few where you might even say that he seems to reject their views outright. Eric has a drinking problem. Is that because he is an idle young middle-class man, or is he troubled in some way? We'll discuss that later. And finally, he slept with Eva/Daisy on a number of occasions. I will discuss later if slept with is the best term to use when describing this act, but regardless, he got her pregnant, which made her position as an out-of-work working-class woman all the more difficult. Just as I have done for every character so far, click the link, I will start with the part of the play's opening stage directions that describe Eric. They say, Eric is in his early 20s, not quite at ease, half shy, half assertive. I want to pick this apart from two perspectives. First of all, Eric is not quite at ease. He's uncomfortable. And that is despite the fact that he is celebrating his sister's engagement in his family home. Now there's lots of reasons why this might be the case, but I would like to suggest that this is because he has Eva/Daisy on the mind. This sort of occasion is bound to make him think about his own love life. And we can assume that the last woman he was involved with was Eva/Daisy, who he got pregnant, stole money for, and then she vanished. Perhaps Eric's guilt about how he treated this young woman is bubbling just below the surface, even at the start of the play. Secondly, half shy, half assertive is somewhat oxymoronic. The two descriptions are contradictory. there seems to be an odd tension at the centre of Eric's character. Is it just because he's drunk? Is it because, as a relatively young man, he is still trying to navigate his masculinity and authority? Or is it something else entirely? I'll leave that to you to decide. Our next quotation comes moments into the play. This quotation comes from the stage directions, and it says, Eric suddenly guffaws. His parents look at him. To guffaw is to laugh loudly and heartily. What is Eric laughing in response to? Well, the lines of dialogue that precede this stage direction are between Sheila and Gerald, who are teasing and flirting with each other a little bit. Now we know that Eric's laughter is unexpected due to the adverb suddenly that describes his action, and the way in which his parents respond to him also tells us this. Why exactly has he responded in this way? We cannot know for certain, although I feel that it adds to my line of argument that he has Eva/Daisy on the brain, because he is awkwardly laughing when a couple are showing their affection for one another. But it definitely presents him as being anxious, tense and nervous. There's something altogether not quite right with Eric. Even if you think this reaction is just because he's drunk, you would have to ask yourself why he is so drunk. Which anxieties, tensions or nerves is he trying to hide? Our third quotation comes during Arthur's interrogation. When he claims that his actions were justified when he sacked Eva/Daisy, and Gerald agrees with him, Eric's response is different. He says, he could have kept her on instead of throwing her out. I call it tough luck. It seems that Eric does not share his father's capitalist views, as he calls her dismissal tough luck and suggests that his father could have kept her on. In particular, the modal verb could is quite interesting. Although Eric is openly disagreeing with his father, he is not doing so with much conviction. Could is quite a weak modal verb. All it does is express a moderate degree of possibility. It provides an alternative, but does not demand that that alternative happens. Think about how much more forceful it would have sounded if Eric said he should have kept her on instead. The unconfident disagreement with his father's capitalist views could illustrate Eric being half shy, half assertive, as stated in the opening stage directions. Whilst it could show that although he rejects capitalist views to an extent, he is, at this point in the play, unsure of what he does believe in. Our fourth quotation comes from the part of the play when Eric is off stage, and comes instead from what Mrs. Birling says about him. It is always interesting to look at how characters speak about each other, especially when the character they are talking about is not around, as that's when the truth comes out. When the inspector asks Mrs. Birling if Eric is used to drinking, she replies with, "No, of course not. He's only a boy." Now, something that immediately jumps out to me is that Mrs. Birling says that her son is only a boy, and that is despite the fact that he is in his early 20s. The noun boy implies that she thinks he is childish, irresponsible, and that she does not necessarily take him particularly seriously. I think that this is generally how both of his parents view him. Certainly, Mr. Birling treats him as if he is a child throughout the play. On the other hand, you could say that this quotation shows Eric to be somewhat deceptive. Eric is clearly a young man who knows his way around a liquor cabinet, and yet his mother cannot see this. So it may present Mrs. Birling as ignorant or as a poor mother, which aren't exactly wrong, but Eric must be doing something to hide his rampant alcoholism away from his mother. So Mrs. Birling's assured negative declarative statements create the impression that Eric is deceptive. Our next quotation comes from the beginning of Act 3. Eric has returned to the scene and knows that he is about to be questioned. Prior to this, though, he asks, miserably, "Could I have a drink first?" For this quotation, I think it is important to look at what he says and how he says it. Starting with what he says, Eric is asking permission to pour himself a drink prior to being questioned. People sometimes have a drink before doing something difficult in order to make them feel braver or less anxious, although this can of course lead to a dependency on alcohol. By asking this question, Eric presents himself as lacking in confidence, respectful because he is asking permission, and ultimately he presents himself as vulnerable. We clearly have a young man here who is struggling and is in way over his head. Let's have a quick look at how Eric says this line too. The stage directions are brief, comprising of only one adverb, miserably. Eric is deeply unhappy, as he knows that he will soon have to relive his involvement with Eva/Daisy. On the one hand, I think this unhappiness is because he cared about her to an extent. Perhaps a small part of him wanted to go off and marry her and raise their child together. On the other hand, I think this misery is also caused by the guilt he feels. Eric could feel guilty about a number of things. He could feel guilty about sleeping with a working class woman, which could bring his family into disrepute. He could feel guilty about getting her pregnant and not being able to properly support her or his unborn child. He could feel guilty about stealing money from his father's business. I'll leave it to you to decide. Our sixth quotation comes only moments later. As Eric tells the story of his involvement with Eva/Daisy, the inspector asks if Eric went to her lodgings, the place she was living, on the night that they first met. Eric admits that he did, but that he cannot remember much because he was drunk, and that although Eva/Daisy said that she didn't want him to go in with her, he says that he was, well, I was in that state when a chap easily turns nasty, and I threatened to make a row. This quotation does not present Eric in a very positive way. It presents him as aggressive, as seen in turn nasty and threatened to make a row. He is presented as being a character that upholds gender stereotypes, as he thinks his actions were excusable because he was in that state when men become aggressive and bestial. And he is also presented as sexist, as he viewed Eva/Daisy as an object that he could use at the end of a night out. I am very careful to avoid saying that Eric raped Eva/Daisy. First, we do not know enough about what happened next. Second, our modern definition of rape is not the same as it was in 1912, a time where even fewer convictions were made and women were encouraged to come forward even less than they are today. Third, we know that Eric and Eva/Daisy met again after this occasion and slept with each other again when he was less drunk, which also blurs these boundaries somewhat. I think that, based on the quotation that we have on screen, it is safer to say that Eric forcefully and aggressively coerced Eva/Daisy to sleep with him. Although I have resisted calling this rape, I think Eric is still presented very negatively here. He used his power as a middle-class man to take what he wanted from a working-class woman. Our seventh quotation immediately follows the sixth. Once Eric confirms that Eva/Daisy let him in because he threatened to make a row, he said, "And that's when it happened, and I didn't even remember. That's the hellish thing. Oh my God, how stupid it all is." I think it's fair to say that this dialogue shows just how much Eric regrets his actions. He speaks in a euphemistic way, only referring to the act of sleeping with Eva/Daisy as it, as if he is too ashamed to acknowledge what it was that he did. He refers to his drunkenness, the thing that caused him to not remember much, as being hellish, implying that it is torturous and the worst possible thing. He even blasphemes, shouting, "My God!" something that would have been fairly extreme in 1912 when he describes the whole thing as stupid. This guilt sets Eric apart from many of the other characters in the play. He knows that what he has done is wrong, stupid and immoral. Being open about his guilt and recognising that he has done an incredibly bad thing presents him in a more favourable way than, say, Mr. or Mrs. Birling, who feel totally justified in their actions. Our 8th quotation is very close to our 7th. Arthur tells Sybil that Eric supplied Eva/Daisy with money that he had supplied from the office. Mrs. Birling is shocked and asks Eric to confirm if he stole the money. His response is, "No, not really. I intended to pay it back." I've selected this quotation as I think it shows an interesting aspect of Eric's character. Here, he is shown to have good intentions, but poor execution. By providing Eva/Daisy with money, he is doing the most decent and respectful thing he can do, since she has already told him that she does not want to marry him. However, by stealing money to do this, he is still doing something bad. Eric, of course, intended to pay it back, showing that he still ultimately wanted to correct his wrongs. But the verb intended is in the past tense, suggesting that he no longer wants to pay the money back. Why is this? Is it because she's dead now, and so he feels that he doesn't need to repay this debt? Is it because he feels that his father should bear this financial loss, because he sacked Eva/Daisy in the first place? Is it because he feels so ashamed of his parents that he does not want to show them any shred of respect? Again, I'll leave that for you to decide. Overall though, I have picked this quotation because it highlights an aspect that is at the centre of Eric's character. He does not know how to do the right thing. This could be because he is stuck somewhere between man and child, caught between his assumedly capitalist upbringing and slightly more sympathetic socialist views, and also that he is trapped between a family who does not care much for him and a woman who society deems unsuitable for him to care for. These tensions cause Eric to struggle when it comes to navigating his place in the world. Our penultimate quotation comes from when Eric finds out that Mrs. Birling rejected Eva/Daisy's request for support. He says, nearly at breaking point, "Then you killed her. She came to you to protect me, and you turned her away. Yes, and you killed her, and the child she had had too. My child, your own grandchild. You killed them both. Damn you! Damn you!" As I've said in a few videos in this series, the use of dashes highlights Eric's emotional state. He is too angry at his mother that he can barely get his words out straight. His mind is a storm that crackles and explodes with half-formed ideas and rage. Eric's dialogue also contains two examples of repetition. The repetition of "you killed her" and "damn you." "You killed her" is blunt, and the repetition of it is emphatic. In his rage, Eric is pinning the blame for Eva/Daisy's death on his mother. It seems that all signs of family loyalty have now been discarded. Eric has chosen the family he wished he could have had over the family that he does have. Furthermore, the repetition of "damn you" is shocking, as he is almost threatening his mother, further highlighting the destruction of family loyalty at this point in the play. Finally, let's have a quick look at the stage directions, because I think they are also emphatic. Eric is not just sad or angry or even furious. No, he is nearly at breaking point. This draws attention to just how emotional Eric is at this point in the play, which may have been caused by the hope that he had for Eva/Daisy and their unborn child. By having this hope dashed, and with it all possibility of him finding a family that does love him, even if it was just his child, Eric is left with his disappointing reality, the loveless Birling family. And here we have our final quotation for Eric, which comes towards the play's end when the characters are debating whether or not the inspector was genuine. Eric tells Gerald that he stole money from his father's business, and when he sees that his father tries to interrupt him, he responds swiftly with, "The money's not the important thing. It's what's happened to the girl and what we all did to her that matters." Here we see the true impact of the night's events on Eric. At the beginning of the play, he tentatively disagrees with his father's capitalist views, but here we see him outright rejecting them and instead adopting a more socialist line of thought, which we can see when he claims that money's not the important thing and that what they all did to Eva/Daisy is the thing that matters. We could choose to trace Eric's increasing distance from capitalist views in this play. Of course, we see him meekly challenging his father's stance on sacking Eva, and we now see him place people over money. But what about how he criticises Mr. Birling's respectable friends and the lifestyles that they lead, which we can see on page 52? Where else does he challenge capitalist views? Just like Sheila, I am hesitant to call Eric a socialist now, as it would be difficult for him to be fully socialist right away, given his capitalist upbringing. However, I am comfortable enough to say that as the play progresses, Eric accepts guilt, shows a greater awareness of social responsibility, and holds increasingly socialist views. You need to consider the author's intentions in order to reach the top grades. So, when writing Eric, what were Priestley's intentions and aims? First of all, I think that by presenting Eric as deeply miserable, which is why I think he has a drinking problem, Priestley has exposed the imperfections of middle-class family life. It seems that Eric does not feel particularly loved by his parents. He says that his father isn't the sort of person a chap could go to when he's in trouble, and says that his mother never did understand. By presenting middle-class family life in this imperfect or fractured way, Priestley may have been inviting his audience to look at themselves. Should they really consider the middle class to be so superior to the working class? Or are both classes flawed in their own ways? Secondly, I feel that the character of Eric goes through something of a redemption arc. He starts the play as a drunken middle-class man-child and ends it as a socially aware young man. This could be Priestley's way of offering his audience a sense of hope and redemption. No matter how poorly they may have behaved towards the working class or women or others generally, they can still change their ways and become part of the solution rather than the problem. And finally, through Eric's actions, I feel that Priestley may have been trying to highlight the injustice of class inequality. In order to properly provide for Eva/Daisy and his unborn child, Eric had to resort to stealing from his father's business. As I said earlier, Eric's intentions were good, but obviously his execution was poor. The fact that Eric had to resort to stealing shows that there really was not much in the way of support or welfare for the working class, which only perpetuated class inequality. By showing Eric to do such extreme things to right the injustice of class inequality, Priestley may have been asking his audience to consider what more could be done, on a nationwide scale rather than a personal one, to support the working class and to right the wrongs of class inequality. So that is our discussion of Eric Birling over. But what could you do now? Well, this time I've not got a revision task for you, as I reckon you probably know how to revise best by now. I would recommend turning the notes you've made, assuming you've made them, into something neater and easier to revise from, such as flashcards or a mind map. Before you go, please don't forget to like the video if it's helped you out, drop a comment on it, and of course, subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so already. As ever, I hope that you have an awesome rest of the day. If you are revising, please remember to take frequent short breaks, as a burned out student is not a happy or successful student, which is what you deserve to be. So there we go. That is my list of 10 quotations as I think you need to know when thinking or writing about the character of Eric Birling. But which one do you think is the most important? Which one best sums up his character or is most essential for you to know when writing about that character in your exams? Please do let me know down in the comment section below, because I think it'd be really awesome to see your ideas and to get your justifications for the quotations that you're picking. Cheers.